Okay, so today I'm going to be running through how to run remote research with people with disabilities. Um, Currently, almost all research is remote due to the 2-year COVID that we've had, but it's good to get a little context on how to do that continuously and then also just how to run research. The things that we're going to cover today, one is the things to consider when planning and running user research studies with people with disabilities. And two, we're going to be doing a demo user interview with Sam, who uses a screen reader to navigate the web. We're going to be running through a page in Reddit today. I won't be able to see the chat, but if you do have any questions, please hold on to them, and I think we'll have enough time to get to them later on. So a bit about me. I am a UX researcher at Fable. I've been here for about a year and a half. My background is actually in community planning and stakeholder engagement, but accessibility is quite close to my heart. My mom is legally blind. She has a guide dog. That's been something that we have been navigating for a number of years now, so it feels very meaningful to be working in this field. I work quite closely with the Fable community. I'll explain what Fable is in just a moment, and I primarily run all of the user research in accessibility for Slack currently. Okay, what is Fable? I'll give you a primer on just what that is to give you a little bit of context, and then we'll go from there. So Fable is a Toronto tech company. It's a leading accessibility testing platform, and it's powered by people with disabilities. So essentially, it's a platform that connects you directly with people with assistive technologies to help get their expertise and their experience on your products, your user flows. Sometimes we run that user research directly for them, or sometimes we're just kind of the platform to connect users with other products themselves who run the research themselves. We have a large group of testers across North America, a huge variety of assistive technology. It's peer-reviewed feedback. The great thing is you get a lot of varied level of expertise. So you get some people who are advanced level users of their AT, have CPAC certifications. And then you have some people who are relatively new. So you get a large variety of users and then also a large variety of feedback, which is quite interesting. Okay, so let's get into it on the research considerations. So inclusive research involves people with disabilities. We're going to talk about how do you actually plan a research study and then tips for actually running that user research with assistive technology users. As I mentioned, we're going to be going through with Sam today. It's going to be less of a user interview and more him walking through how his AT works. We don't have a full hour, unfortunately, to run a user interview, although I wish we could. So just to start off, what is accessibility research? It's quite different than user research. Some of the key differences are that large sample size don't always make sense. Usually assistive technology users are a small portion of your users, and you can scale recruitment down accordingly. A small group of AT users can also find most issues. Findings from one AT users can be extrapolated to other users of the same AT. So usually about 5 is our magic number. At Fable, we kind of classify things into 3 groups of assistive technology users, screen reader users, screen magnification users, and alternative navigation users. Usually a representation of 5 is a great number to get a lot of the findings that you need, and then always you can follow up after that. I think the last key is very important when you're considering how to run accessibility research. Product users are hard to find if it's not accessible. So we actually run into this quite a bit where often when you're running kind of user research, you want to find people who are already users of the product or the website and get their feedback. But I think a lot of times we forget that some of the barriers, if something isn't accessible, you're not going to have users in the first place. So the first step is creating an accessible product enough to then attract product users and go from there. You really need to think about the bigger picture of who is already using it and also who's not using it and why, and really build out your discussion guides and your research based off of that. Okay, so planning user research. Location, we at Fable we use Zoom because we find it the most accessible as far as captions go, but Google Meets or another tool is also really great. Depending on how you're conducting your research, sometimes it's also great to ask what people's preferences are as far as it goes for the technology that they're using. Also, it's great to consider the methods. How are you running this? For a user interview, is the participant verbal? For something like a prototype review, which is quite common in tech spaces with something like Figma, it's actually not designed to work with screen readers. Well, it's not designed to work with screen readers, but it doesn't work with screen reader users. So you have to kind of, when you're doing a research study, you have to keep in mind alternative ways of getting the feedback that you're looking for and ensure that you are still capturing a lot of voices in the research cycle, even if what you're using to test can't be accessible at that moment. There's other ways around it. You just kind of have to get creative with it. Consent, prepare in advance, ensure participants fully understand what's being expected of them. This also goes for, especially if you're doing a prototype review or if you know something is going to be a little bit tricky, just letting know you don't want to prime people to have a bad experience, but you want them to understand the full bounds of what the user interview is and what the expectations are. As far as payment, offer choices, you're getting really great feedback when you do accessibility research, and people should be compensated for their time. Always, if you can, ask how people prefer, especially if you have testers who are on some social assistance. There's better ways that work for them that they would appreciate being compensated. Privacy, this happens a lot, especially with screen reader users. There's a lot of private information and privacy leaks that happen a lot by accident. So just keep in mind of people's privacies. And also when you're running research, always include extra time to be able to make those edits out to protect privacy. So consideration for interviews. I think one of the biggest things when you're running accessibility research is timing. In general, interviews with AT users take longer to complete. This is for a few reasons. Usually it takes people a little bit longer to get grounded and orientated in what the site or the product is. You always want to make sure that you're giving people time to feel comfortable and to have a moment to really explore the pages before you're asking them to complete tasks. Getting orientated is very important. You also often have some tech issues, that's quite common. So you want to leave enough time to help make sure that people aren't rushed and you're getting good feedback. I usually expect that an accessibility user interview takes about 30% longer. So when you're running research, just to keep that in mind, also plan for breaks. I like to break things into tasks, task 1, 2, 3, and kind of give people a roadmap knowing that it also helps time box things quite nicely so that you know when it's okay to move on. And that also, if you need to move on and something's not completed, it's not a reflection on them. Nothing went wrong. It's just a good, we have to keep going to complete other tasks. Expectations. AT users expect to run into barriers by default. This is just kind of the nature of as we're improving a lot of sites and a lot of products, there are a lot of existing barriers. This kind of flows into the troubleshooting that users will blame themselves or their AT for issues. This is quite common and a key difference from regular user research that most likely AT users will blame themselves and they'll think that they're doing something wrong or that their assistive technology is doing something wrong and that they need to, it's not them. When you're running this type of research, I think that there's often an idea that you need to be completely unbiased in these instances. I would disagree. In certain cases, you need to be an advocate and you need to remind people that their opinions, their experiences are completely valid. And if something's not working, it's not a reflection on them. It's not a reflection on their AT use. It's a reflection on the product themselves and an opportunity to improve that. And you just need to kind of have those little touch points and also tying back into the timing, have breaks. Sometimes people get frustrated. They get upset that something's not working the way that they wanted to. And that's also entirely valid. And you need to give people space to express those feelings and their disappointment and not rush those because they're very important moments that ultimately create like a very meaningful user interview. So considerations based off of this three assistive technologies that I talked about. Screen reader users often use high speech rates, but it takes longer to orientate themselves and run into more issues during an interview. As this kind of ties into the timing, you really want to give people at least 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how complex the page is, to really give them time to understand what's being expected and then also to feel comfortable in the navigation. I always think of this as similar to if you were to put someone in a new car for the first time, you wouldn't just tell them to go onto the expressway. You'd probably take them on some side streets. You'd give them some time, make sure that they're checking their side views and mirrors. You want to have time so that people are having both an enjoyable experience, but they're also feeling comfortable. Alternative navigation users sometimes switch between different AT types or different ways of interacting with their AT. Often you can see people go between kind of mouse grids or click commands, which are just different ways of navigating based off of what they're trying to do and what's more efficient to them. I think that's something that surprises people when they see alternative navigation research for the first time. This is also a great opportunity to just ask questions of why they're doing that. Why are they switching? What are they hoping to find? Do they want to switch? Sometimes people are forced to. For example, a click command is something that is I wouldn't say ideal experience, but makes things a little bit easier. So for example, on Zoom, if you wanted to share a screen, you'd say share screen, and that would be a click command. If that wasn't programmed properly though, you would have to use a mouse grid that splits the screen up into 3x3 sections, so 9 sections in total, and you kind of keep narrowing down on each of the grids until you are on the element that you want to select, which would be share screen. Obviously, this takes a little bit longer of time, so in certain scenarios, one can work better than the other, and you never want to assume that one is better than the other. You should always just ask why someone's navigating and if that's their ideal way that they'd like to be navigating. The final one is screen magnification users. They can take longer or not, depending on how well the product supports low vision users. You see this quite often in web pages where sometimes if you zoom in, things break and they go into all different categories and places on the screen, which is not an ideal experience. Sometimes it works as expected and it just zooms in at what you would expect and it doesn't take much longer in time. But when you're planning a research study that includes all three groups, you need to have these considerations in mind of the questions that you're asking as well as the time that you are allocating for each of these tasks. Continued assistive technology can cause unexpected issues. It's another layer of software and or hardware on top of video conferencing tools and the product itself. This speaks to the time as well. You want to give time to make sure that you can troubleshoot what is going on. At times, not all of the issues will be solvable by you or the participant, and that's just kind of the way that things go. People run into tech issues, people run into issues with the software and the assistive technology. Don't hesitate to end an interview or pause and come back later. It's not a reflection on you, it's not a reflection on the participant if something doesn't go as expected. Also, accessibility testing prior to user testing can identify major issues to fix before working with users. We often speak about, in accessibility research, about the edge users, that if you design for the edge, you get a great experience in the middle. For example, when people were designing Google Maps, that was actually a form of alternative navigation of Google Maps speaking the directions out loud. Turn left at this car, not car at this street. And then that ended up being something that was designed with usability for accessibility users in mind, but is now wildly used by all types of users. So there's a lot of benefits to designing and thinking of accessibility first, and then seeing how that can extrapolate across into different experiences. Okay, so running user interviews. So when we go through user interview prompts, I think one of my favorite things is just to ask, how did that experience make you feel? It's really easy to get caught up on metrics and quantitative methods in user interviews, which is very important, but I think fundamentally understanding how an experience makes someone feel. Would this cause you to abandon it? Does it make you feel self-conscious? What are the feelings that you have when you're navigating this product? Did that component behave as you expected it to? When I ask this question, it's great to kind of do a comparison and ask before someone does something what they expect it to do, and then see if it actually did what they expected it to do. Overall, what do you think of the experience? This is an important one. Sometimes I think people focus in on things that went wrong, and you can either over or underestimate how much that affected the user experience. Maybe something went really badly for a brief period of time and that didn't bother them. Maybe it did greatly, and it's a really great time to get a pulse check on overall how the experience went. What did you expect to happen next? This speaks to the earlier part. How do you usually navigate a page like this? This is a really important one because especially with screen reader users and alternative navigation, people navigate things in very different ways and in ways that are individual to them. For example, when we show Sam, he'll probably navigate by headings in this user interview. That's a common way to navigate on a web page with screen reader users, but that's not the only way. So you want to understand why people are navigating and how, and if that's their ideal. What would improve your experience here? I think this is a really important one. Often we get caught up on compliance and just making sure that things are WCAG appropriate or ADA, but we really want to kind of move away from just compliance to almost like a dream state. What would make this ideal? What would improve it? What would be your blue skies rainbow experience? Was it easy or hard to find X, i.e. a search bar? Tell me about your ideal experience with X, i.e. a search bar. Something that is surprising sometimes when actually using a search bar is the auto correct for spelling. I kind of see this actually quite a bit where if you search and there's no spelling correction in it, sometimes you'll get no results and you don't know why, and you don't know that there was a spelling mistake. How are you feeling after that? Did anything unexpected happen? The how are you feeling after that is great because it also can kind of reset a user interview if someone's getting really frustrated or they just need a kind of some space to vent. Part of your job when you're running these interviews is to absorb that energy and kind of be a safe place to be able to have those conversations if someone is really not feeling well or if someone's really overjoyed about it. The last one is also quite important. Was there anything you really enjoyed? The really enjoyed part is important to me because I think we focus a lot on issues and not enough on joy, and both understanding what people loved so that it doesn't change, but also giving space to have positive experiences and positive feedback as well. At the end of the interview, what was your overall experience? How easy was this for you to find the information you were looking for? This one, were there any other challenges that you haven't told me about yet? I think this is a great question because it gives people space to tell you about something that you might not have asked. It also gives a great closeout to understand that someone's fully told you what their experience is and to validate it. And then also this last one, would you recommend this experience to other users of your assistive technology? This is great because I think sometimes it's hard to almost envision these conversations. And if you think about your friend or your colleague who uses the same assistive technology as you, would you want them to go through this experience? It's a little bit easier to understand a recommendation on that level than kind of just a yes, no, would you recommend this to a random person on the internet? Making space for those personal connections and empathy with, both with yourself, but also with other people in your community is really special. And then don't be afraid to ask. I see this quite a bit. People are afraid of asking the wrong questions or in the wrong ways. Most of the time, people are excited to be running accessibility research. They want the opportunity to improve. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't guess what the participant is saying if their speech is not clear. Ask them to clarify. Sometimes screen reader users can go quite fast, and that's okay, but give them an opportunity to make sure that you're understanding what they're trying to say. Don't guess or make assumptions about what they can or can't do. If someone is running into problems, ask before you help them. Maybe there's a lot of people who like to navigate a page and test out all options before they want help, or sometimes they don't want help at all, and that's totally fine because that's how someone would naturally navigate a page. Some people are more likely to ask for help than others, and that's totally valid. Don't guess or make assumptions about how they feel or why they did something. Again, ask if you want to know, give spaces for those conversations, and don't ask about their disabilities. Some people are happy to offer this information of the history and background of their disability because it's quite important to their identity, but you don't need to ask that. You can ask about their assistive technology configuration. And then again, I find especially on different demographics, people like to share different things about this, but it's always to keep in mind that when you're doing research on products, it's not necessarily about the type of disability that they have, but the AT that they're using. Okay, so I'm just going to pause just for a moment and bring up my screen share to show a demo from Sam. Just a moment.
Hi, I'm Sam, the Community Manager at Fable Tech Labs. I'm a full-time screen reader user, and today I'm going to be giving a brief demo of the Reddit website using my screen reader, which is NVDA, on the latest version of Windows 10. So I've picked Reddit because not only have they thought a lot about accessibility, but they've also thought a lot about how to go beyond compliance and into building a great product through working with their community and understanding our needs. So I'm starting out on the front page of a subreddit that I really enjoy. I have my screen reader going at an extremely high rate of speed because this is generally the speed that I, as a completely blind person, would listen to my screen reader at and would use to sort of skim through a web page and to move as quickly as I would like to. However, for the purposes of this demo, even though I wouldn't normally use my screen reader at a slower rate of speed, I'm going to go ahead and slow it down so that everyone can follow along with the experience that I'm having on Reddit.
Rate 35, rate 30. Introducing our 2 new moderators, heading level 3 link.
And I think that's a pretty good speed that everyone should be able to keep up with. Now, one of the things that Reddit has thought about is, when you have landed on a page of posts, what is the thing that's most important? And the important thing in this case is the title of the posts. So they've made sure that each title is marked up by a heading, because with my screen reader, I have a hotkey that allows me to jump from heading to heading to heading without having to hear any of the other information. And this allows me to get a really good overview of what is currently trending in this community in the same way that a sighted person might.
My first heartbeat run, he got judged at Juggernaut, Barricade, Go Get M Scales, a pixel art fan of sensational. I finally did it, took a while heading, finally made it to Ironclad when you're running all defect was anyone, daily discussion / debate number 500.
And I found an interesting post, daily discussion debate. And so now what I can do, instead of jumping by headings, is use my arrow keys to navigate through all of the different elements.
Toggle 70, toggle button not pressed upvote, 72. Toggle button not pressed downvote.
So I can hear not only that there is an upvote and a downvote that has been properly labeled, but it's also telling me the status of those buttons.
70 toggle button not pressed upvote.
So I'll go ahead and upvote.
Pressed.
And we hear that it makes sure to inform me that something has happened and that my action has been successful.
73 toggle but link heading level 3 daily disc sales 100.
And then we hear the title.
Link discussion.
We hear the tag.
Posted by link u/Graham McLaughlin 100 link 22 hours ago. Posted by link u/Gavin Zai.
And who posted?
Link 22 hours ago. Menu button collapsed submenu expand content. Link 53. Link comments.
And how many comments there are. So what I can go ahead and do is press enter in order to load the comments for the post. One thing you'll notice is that when I do that, it loads the post in a new tab for me. That is a function that is changeable in Reddit's preferences, because Reddit understands that some people will want things to load in the same tab, some people will want comments to kind of pop out in a little modal dialog, and some people would rather have the post load in an entirely new tab. And so that's something that Reddit allows you to fully customize so that you can make sure that Reddit is meeting your needs.
Daily discussions.
I can now jump right to the heading and get straight into reading the post.
Link discussion, previous discussion, link daily discussion, link wiki list with 3 items, bullet, common defect, card left parent, attack right parent.
And so this is a daily discussion of a debate between 2 different kind of cards on a game called Slay the Spire that I play frequently.
No next edit, give award button.
I can then go straight down to the buttons at the bottom to award it, etc.
Button 9 sort by.
But another interesting thing that I'd like to focus on is how the comments work.
Button best. Toggle button not pressed upvote. Toggle button not pressed downvote.
So again, we have upvote and downvote buttons. But you can also hear here...
Level 1 link Albus Notmus.
It's going to say level 1, followed by the username who posted it. And the purpose of that is to let me as a screen reader user know something that's clear to you visually. Which level is this comment at? Is this a first level comment?
65 points middle dot.
As this one is.
Link 20, it's fun, and despite being a meme, it's not actually that bad. It can ramp up damage very quickly. The issue with claws that you need a packet, even would reveal some other hardware.
And then we can skip down to the next
button.
comment.
But level 1 link is amiable.
And we'll hear that it's level 1 again, which lets me very easily tell, am I reading an entirely new thread of discussion,
Sales, 200.
or was that a reply to the previous discussion? And so I'm going to go ahead and close this tab now.
Left parent, 2 right.
And
button give award, visited link comments, unknown
we're
person.
returned exactly to where I was before when I clicked on this comments link, which is why I've set it up like this. You'll also notice that when I read the title of my window,
left parent, 2 right parent, Slay the Spire and 1 more page dashboard.
It says 2 at the beginning, which is a very good way for me to know that I have 2 messages waiting in my inbox, even though I might not necessarily notice something, say, that's a different color or that's been highlighted or that stands out in some visual way. So I know that once I'm finished with this recording, I need to go and check on my inbox and see who's messaged me. So this is a really great example of how you can build a product not just by thinking about lists of compliance, but by thinking about a great user experience and about how the product is used, what information is available easily to a visual user, and how to best pass that on to the user of a screen reader. I hope that you've learned a little something that you may not have known before about screen readers, and that this demo has been of value to you as you think about how to make your products not only more accessible, but also a great user experience.
So I really love that because it gave an example of how AT users have different preferences and how a great experience ties into that of giving people options of what they would prefer. Just like you use things in unique ways, I often use Adobe Illustrator in ways that is not how you're supposed to use it, but it works for me and it allows that customization, which is really important to make sure that people are navigating things in the ways that works best for them. All right, so we're going to pretend that that was a user interview, although it was Sam navigating himself. But one thing that can be useful in reporting interview findings is to show contrast. If you have findings from non-assistive technology users, you can demonstrate their interactions compared to assistive technology user interactions using video clips. A great way of contrasting this is also the amount of time that it takes to complete a task. We call this the time task completion rate in UX terms. And that's a great way to both quantify how long something is taking, but also have that on an empathetic view. No one wants to take longer than they should, than they need to complete some tasks. So I think it's something that people always understand a little bit more to have those kind of compare and contrast. I also like to lean heavily on data more than my own interpretation of it, showing video clips to demonstrate the user's experience, using direct user quotes in reports, and using an AUS score, which I'll go over in a little bit, to describe the accessibility and usability of an experience. I think by and large, video clips are one of the most powerful ways. It's a very human way to understand what's both going on screen, but also a user's perspective, as well as quotes. It's just something that can really ground people in what is actually happening for assistive technology users. So as I mentioned, this is something that Fable invented. It's based off of the SUS score, which is the System Usability Scale. This is kind of a classic thing in UX research to understand how people are experiencing kind of products and digital products. And Fable has augmented that for an accessibility usability score. It's free for anyone to use. It's on our website. I'm not trying to plug Fable too much, but I also think it's a really great way to start benchmarking and understanding what that is. So what the AUS is an easy to understand psychometric survey that assistive technology users require little to no support to complete. It's a 10 question survey. It's numerical. The numerical scores don't require a significant amount of subject matter expertise to understand, unlike WCAG or heuristic valuations. It's inclusive. It complements existing SUS scores, but it's tailored to people who use assistive technology users, and it's free. If you want to try it, please let me know, and also feel free to share your feedback on how it works for you. But I think it's a really great opportunity to start asking those questions. You include it at the end of an experience, and it gives you a really great insights. So one final thought of prioritizing issues by frequency and volume leaves accessibility behind. So sometimes we think about issues as how often they come up instead of the overall effects on what that means. So what I mean by that specifically is sometimes, especially when you're doing digital products, you note how often an issue is appearing rather than the overall impact on a user. This ties into how we prioritize accessibility feedback. It's kind of on this 3-point scale of 1, can users get access to the service? If it's low, there's multiple alternatives of ways to do something. Medium is that there is only one alternative, and then high is there's no alternative. So if there's only one way to send an email and you can't send an email, it's a pretty high impact. And can users perform critical tasks? Low is can perform the entire task independently. Medium is can perform some parts of the task independently, and high is cannot perform any of the tasks independently. This kind of ties into something, it's also knowledge on the digital product itself. So going back to kind of an email example, if you're in Outlook, sending an email, composing an email is very crucial to that product versus having an emoji that might not have the right alt text. They're very different levels of impact, even though they're not working as expected. And then the last one is how frequently will the user perform the particular task? Low is rarely, medium is occasionally, and high is routinely. Going back to the email, if you're in Outlook and you're sending emails, you're going to be doing that fairly often, so it's quite important versus setting your out of office notifications. All right, I think we're almost at, almost 15 minutes too. So I see that there was some questions in the Q&A and chat. So I want to give a little bit of time to answer some of those questions as well. Great.
Hi, Kaitlyn. I'm
I'm
going to go ahead
just,
and jump in here and
yeah, for
ask
sure.
those questions for you. I've
Thank
been
you.
gathering them in the Q&A, and just wanted to remind people that go ahead and get those questions in. We'll try to get through them, and we will still be taking them kind of up until I get to the bottom of the list. So the starting off here, the first one is from Ozzy. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But they ask, I recently saw a post online regarding replacing the term assistive technology with access technology. And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I think the nature of different communities and different ways that people identify is those terms are always evolving a little bit more. And it's something to just be aware of and ask people what their preferences are. I still use assistive technology, but if someone would prefer access technology, I understand why that would be someone's preference, and I'm happy to go back and forth with that. It's one of those things that, depending on kind of the geography, the region, the community, the demographics, those things change. So you never want to assume what someone would like. So the safest thing is just to ask.
Great, great. Next, we have a question from Kelsey, and they ask, how do you allow for people blaming themselves slash AT in the results of the interview, even if you remind them to be honest?
That's actually one of the hardest things I find with user interviews. And I think it's one of the differences that I spoke to a little bit about the difference between regular user interviews and assistive technology and accessibility interviews. I think if you were to do classic user research and UX research, you want to be really unbiased, but I actually take the point in my research that you do want to be an advocate and you want to remind people that if something isn't working, it's not them. And kind of just go over that many times, and that a reminder that it's an opportunity to improve, and kind of take something that's not going well and remind them again, it's not them, it's not their AT, their experiences are valid. And if you're lucky enough to work with the same testers over and over again, you actually see that evolution in both confidence in explaining their experiences, and then also confidence in owning that and kind of demanding better and not blaming them as much. But those are really beautiful evolutions that happen at time. So I always love to see when that happens as well.
Next, we have a question from Jana, and they ask, I'm not aware of our district having previously included students in our curriculum options. Or adoptions, excuse me. Would an in-person user research session differ much from a remote session? Are there additional considerations that should be weighed when conducting in-person sessions? And they add, this is a wonderful presentation and just what I needed. Thank you.
Thanks. I haven't conducted that much in-person research, but I will actually lean back on when I used to conduct research for community planning. I used to work for the City of Toronto, and I think there's a lot of things in where and how you select the spaces. So you want spaces that are non-biased. What I mean by that is sometimes people aren't as comfortable in a church as maybe a school or maybe a community center. Keeping those in mind, there's also a lot of physical barriers. So if you want to make sure that people, one, know how they're going to be able to navigate, and also that it's your responsibility to ensure that those spaces are accessible when people are coming in for interviews. I find when you are doing in person, people can get a little bit more heated on things, which is also really interesting because you kind of aren't hiding behind a screen. And you also have really great opportunities for understanding because of that. I think some of the most meaningful interactions that I've had when I was doing stakeholder engagement and user interviews on something that was really tied to people's identities, which was housing and a social housing, is when people have those interactions in person and you really give them the space to have that. A lot of the time, people just want to be heard, and giving them the space both a physical safe space and a mental safe space is really important to that.
Next, we have a question from Simon. Well, actually, it's more just a comment. It says, not a question, but I really appreciate the open-ended question. Were there any other challenges that you haven't told me about yet? That's a great way to get input. If you have anything else to add to that, or, you know.
Yeah, I think sometimes I would actually expand on that as not just ask about the challenges, but is there anything else that you'd like to tell me? The challenges is really helpful, but then also going back to not trying to think of just issues, thinking about maybe there's actually a solution that you haven't asked about that they would like to offer, or maybe there's something that they really enjoyed. So giving an open-ended closeout is a really good way, and I find you actually get some of the most interesting insights at the end when you ask those questions.
Deborah asks, how do you connect with consumers who can't access virtual research opportunities due to internet inaccessibility, related to consumers who live in rural areas, can't afford internet, or experience inaccessible options through virtual platforms?
That's really difficult. I'm not going to lie. When you think about inclusive research, not just people with disabilities, there's a spectrum, and you have to think about how those intersect. So rural versus urban, different levels of economic class, different literacy rates, those all intersect, and the ways that they intersect ensure more inclusive products. But it's a huge barrier with internet, and I know I can speak to Canada more commonly, areas in northern Canada that it's just very difficult to run those user interviews. I don't have a workaround for that besides in person, which isn't always possible, but I'm hoping as I'm actually really hopeful due to COVID, how people have seen how inequities in internet actually extrapolate across a lot of different inequities. And I'm really hopeful that it's a good opportunity to get everyone on the same playing field.
Next, we have Sarah asking, do you have guidance for us who are managing government websites? I'd be interested in some UX testing for our site, but I'm not sure how to do that, considering we have state contract requirements if we pay anyone for anything.
I think I need some clarity on that question. Do you mean I think there's two ways to answer this, and if you mean doing UX testing for yourself, or if you are looking actually to contract. Doing UX testing for yourself, if you don't want to do a paid contract, or you don't have the ability to do that, if hopefully you have an existing basis of users, and you can go through that and do some sort of survey on people who already use assistive technologies of your site and go through that way, that's a good way to start doing user research in that way without having to go through outside contracts, which I used to work in government. It's not that fun. And then also, if you do look into something like Fable, usually whether it's at Fable or elsewhere, there's experts that can help you navigate through that procurement process, because it's not fun.
Yeah, procurement is another beast entirely.
I know.
Next, we have a question from Theo. Does Fable ever work with individual researchers or programmers? For example, a university faculty member creating a complex website to showcase their research?
At times. So I think something I should point out is the dedicated research that I run is actually a small subset of what Fable does. It's actually more common to have people who use the platform to connect directly with users than for me to run it on their behalf. That might just be because people have a really great group of user researchers. They have the capacity, they have the time. When they don't, then we run the dedicated research for them. But Fable has worked with individual researchers or for studies to help people go through that process. But it is a really great opportunity to use a platform, whether it's Fable or somewhere else, to run that research yourself.
Okay, and we've got a couple other questions coming in, but we've kind of reached the end of our time here. I want to give everybody a chance to get a good break in, and so I think we will just leave it at that. Thanks, Kaitlyn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I know that you put in a lot of work to this, especially with the 3-day event. So I want to say thank you for that as well.